Today on the Clean Power Hour, green bonds pass $1 trillion. I'm Tim Montague, your co-host. Welcome to John Weaver, commercial solar guy and co-host of the Clean Power Hour. Hey, John.
Morning, Tim. How you doing this week?
We're rocking and rolling. I just hosted Jigger on the Solar Podcast this morning. It was very unexpected. I look forward to publishing that later this week. Jigger is a native Illinoisan and his parents live here still, so he's committed to helping us move the clean energy transition forward, which is great. Love to get his ideas out into the public sphere.
I want to I'm going to interrupt you because as I was thinking about what we're going to talk today, I was saying to myself, I have to make sure that I bring up the Shah interview as quickly as I can, because I know Tim is excited about talking to him, and you actually managed to beat me to it. So hey, ladies and gentlemen, Jigger Shah, he's going to be posted a little bit later this week, just to make sure you heard that.
Yeah, it's a big deal for the Solar Podcast, and it's a big deal for Illinois. So it's a great opportunity, and Jigger is all about opportunity. What are we going to do in the headlines today? We're going to talk about the largest solar project globally going live in China. It's a 2.2 gigawatt solar project. We're going to talk about Germany going 52.9% renewables. We're going to talk about thermal PV. I love thermal PV. That's how I got my start in the industry. Yeah. We're going to talk about agrivoltaics, another favorite of mine and John's, and so much more. So let's get into the news, John. I was wondering, though, before we get into the solar news, if you could give us an update on your Tesla, because I love hearing about it.
All right. It's still a pretty cool car. I'm starting to learn how to drive it. It takes a little bit of learning how to really literally drive the car. You have to new buttons. And so this happened this week, which I thought was cool. So if you look at that first little tweet down at the bottom, the one that I referenced below the picture, you see me asking about a week ago, like literally, I think the Saturday I bought the car, September 26th. I think that's Saturday morning, thinking about this car. And I'm like, hey, well, what happens, when autopilot's on, I'm cruising in the passing lane because I'm forgetful. How's that work? And everybody's like, be an adult, get out of the lane. Well, this week, an over-the-air update added a feature saying that if you're in the passing lane, on autopilot, on, automated driving, should the car automatically get out of the lane? Yes, of course it should. That's what a car is supposed to do. Why would a car stay there otherwise? Except human beings do it all the time because we're really annoying. But my car will no longer be annoying. It would only be me who is annoying in that car. And the neatest part is that the Saturday before when I bought the car, it didn't have that feature. And now the car does have that feature. And I know we've been getting over-the-air updates on our computers and our phones and our laptops for like 20 years since Microsoft became cool or whoever else did it first. But I've never had it on a car. And that's pretty sweet. And I don't know if do any other cars have over-the-air updates other than for like the radio?
Not that I'm aware of. It is a hallmark of Tesla that they do over-the-air updates. So
somehow my car has now got more value than the day I bought it. It's worth less. We know how depreciation works. It's not brand new anymore, but It's got more value than the day I bought it. And that was just one of the updates. There were like 8. There's been at least 2 updates since I bought this car, at least 2 of them. So now I have 6 new features, 6 new buttons to push. How awesome is that?
Well, more importantly, Tesla's going hard after full self-driving. They call it FSD. And once that rolls out, you want that interactivity, right? You want the latest and greatest software, and you don't want to have to go to the dealer. So it's funny how many naysayers there are still about this. I consider full self-driving a narrow AI task. It's a good AI task, but it's so doable. And still, there are just so many naysayers saying it's never coming, he's full of crap. But Tesla's way ahead of the competition on this front. They're logging billions of miles now, and that database is gold, and how they are pulling away. But once your car has FSD, John, it's a cash machine.
Well, I do like that concept. The robo taxi, if the car actually turns into that, that would be sweet because I'm one of those drivers who really only drives a few miles a day for 4 out of 5 days. And then I go to a site visit once or twice a week. So I get it. But I'll tell you, Google's also doing pretty good with their automated driving car. It's rolling around the streets of Phoenix. So they're the first company that I know of making money from full self-driving, and that's seemingly happening in Phoenix and Arizona, Scottsdale maybe. A very grid-like, simple road system, limited area. You only go a certain distance, but they're doing it too. It's going to roll out in Tesla. It's going to be sweet. They have more miles probably going on with people like me doing the, pull the lever down twice and the car just drives itself.
This is not just a gimmick. This is truly about making automobiles safer. We kill tens of thousands of people every year in automobiles in the US. I think upwards of 1 million people globally. It's a huge number of people that die in automobile accidents. And we humans are fallible. We're imperfect. We're very smart, but we're not very good drivers. And the FSD, once you have a lot of full self-driving cars on the road, cars are all of a sudden 90% safer. So it's going to save huge amounts of lives. Now, we have to figure out how to not overpopulate the world with so many less deaths, but that's a good problem to have.
Yeah, yes. Yes, it is.
We like live people.
Yeah.
So let's talk more about green bonds passing $1 trillion mark. I know this isn't a solar story. This is a sustainability story. What's the story, John?
It's just that the financeability of these technologies we're using to transition the world's energy is growing, and it's cumulatively now seeing numbers that are among the largest investment sectors globally. This is from Bloomberg New Energy Finance. They noted that this year through September, they were $200 billion worth of bonds. And that is, I think, what's it say, 12% more than the first 9 months of last year. And even September was strong, $50 billion of projects. So 25% of the year's numbers hit in September. That's a big number. So, maybe we'll see another 150, 350, $400 billion in bonds. And yeah, that picture on the right, that image, that's the quarterly number since 2007-ish when they started tracking it. And you can see the volume growing. And that's not, we work in an industry that needs a lot of capital. And we work in an industry where we're building 20 and 30-year infrastructure projects. That upfront cash is very important. Having access to it at a cheap price that's manageable is very important. And having a smooth flowing market so that these transactions aren't so bespoke is very important. And the fact that they could drop $50 billion in a month of deals, I know they've been working on those deals for a while, but there's a machine rolling. And you saw that nice clean curve. And that curve still, of course, it could bump at any point. The world is complex, but that's a nice growing curve. And so it's still at the inflection. We could see hundreds of billions of dollars per quarter instead of hundreds of billions per year. And we had 100 billion in the last quarter. That's what we had in the year about 2 years ago. So it's just big money, big opportunity.
Speaking of Jigger Shaw earlier, he estimates that we need an investment of about 10 trillion in infrastructure in order to basically decarbonize the economy. And, that's not a huge investment in the greater scheme of things. It's a big investment, but it's not off the charts ginormous. It's totally doable. And the point that he keeps making time and time again is that there is cheap money available to towns, cities, and utilities to upgrade their infrastructure, convert it to next generation technology, save money, clean the air, create jobs, create economic development, and step back from this whole, well, we're a Rust Belt. This is a huge problem in Illinois. Jigger grew up in Sterling, Illinois, where there was a very big steel factory that closed. and it's a big hole in the economy, right? When a big private company closes in a small town, and the town has never recovered from that hole. And he's saying, look, there's huge opportunity. You just have to tap into it. So I think that's my takeaway from my discussion with Jigger Shah this morning is more people need to get assertive about grabbing onto the resources that are available.
Right now, I'm working a project as a consultant in California with the Ucaipa Valley Water District, and they're seeking two microgrids, one at a water treatment and one at a pumping facility in Ucaipa Valley. And we're at the second, this week we get the final bids. We've been working through the numbers for a while, and the district's going to save hundreds of thousands of dollars from year one, zero money down, and they're going to get resiliency, and they're going to save hundreds of thousands of bucks. I mean, that's the way the equation works right now, with a combination of 3-decade PPA, tax benefits, the price of electricity in California. And you know what? I'm going to say a thing that I feel bad about liking, but I love liking it. The week of the beginning of the in-depth transaction, talking about it with the customer, I got a link on, I think, LinkedIn, saying that Southern Cal Edison was raising the electricity price 9% in 1 month. That's awesome. For me, the solar guy. For me, the private guy, I got to pay an extra $10 a month. You know what? Personally, I'll pay an extra $10 a month if my solar power projects have a 1-year faster payback. That's a worthy investment for me as a consumer. I feel sorry for the rest of the world having to deal with this, but that's reality. And that's what's happening. And so now I'm going to get this company, this water district, this public entity, we're going to save them probably $30 million over the next 3 decades for zero money down. They just have to give us their headspace and their wall plugs. And that's real. So, 0% down for a city, 30 millions in savings, and clean electricity and resiliency. That's what we're doing with cities because they're such good customers.
So there's a couple stories about China that I want to talk about, and this is about infrastructure. The first story, which I don't know how this slipped past us last week. I don't think we talked about this, but China has put a stake in the ground to be net zero by 2060. And they represent 28% of global carbon emissions, or global greenhouse emissions. So if they can go net zero or carbon neutral, that is a huge win for stepping back from the brink of climate chaos. Now, I know that our friends on the Energy Gang talked about this, and there was mixed reviews. I think Jigger was quite critical of what China is doing, basically saying, yeah, but they're still building coal plants and they're still funding coal plants. There's 2 major funders of coal, China and Japan, apparently. I know India's in there too, but they're building coal throughout Asia. And but anyway, so it's not without its challenges and issues. But the fact they're putting a stake in the ground, though, John. Like, when are we going to do that?
Well, I don't want to talk about our politics right now, because whatever. On a state level, we're doing it, stakes here and there. But about that China thing, about the criticism with the coal, that criticism is an appropriate criticism, and President Xi of China, the leader, he has explicitly stated it in his speech on the topic that our coal is an issue. And by the way, we did cover it last week. We got it last in the prior show, but we're covering it better this time. And so he brought it up and he talked about that. Now I'm going to say 2 things on it. One is the coal that they're building today, to the best of my knowledge, lowers net emissions because it's replacing older, more inefficient coal. And 2, You know, they're going to build more coal. They're going to peak by 2030. And even though they were going to build more coal outside the country, it'd be better if they didn't. However, this is a necessary sin to kind of sort of bring up the last chunks of the world up to livable levels. And I wish they would do it differently and push wind and solar, but that's just not the market, and they have to win the geopolitical game. But on net, I mean, they say they're going to peak by 2030 as their goal. That's really what matters. If they're building more coal, yeah, we hope not. But if they peak by 2030, they push the electric cars, them doing that is going to drive the scale of their market so much that the rest of us are going to benefit no matter what they're doing. Even if China is building coal, the rest of the world is going to be closing it down so fast, the net volume is still going to be decreasing. And the net volume will decrease because China's building the batteries, China's building the panels, and exporting them to the world. And they're going to be doing that even more so because their volume is going to have to double and triple. A gentleman suggested that we need to install about 60 to 70 gigawatts of solar per year to meet their numbers. Well, if China suddenly doubles their numbers, gets up to 60, 70, that's going to cause just greater scale in the industry, greater growth. And the net solution, the net benefit will be greater than the coal cost. So yes, stick it to them on the coal. There's lots of us in the same moment. We can pat them on the back, and then we can give them a good stern talking to, and help them and push them to get off that coal piece. And that's the way it works. This is a big game. It's not. We can't just throw it off. If we just end it all, people die. That's you got to manage it.
Agreed. So the sister story, which I've been showing on screen here, is that China has now commissioned a 2.2 gigawatt solar plant. It only took them a year to build this thing, which is incredible that you could build so much solar. As you can see in the photo here, I mean, this is truly a landscape scale solar project. It includes 202 megawatts of storage as well. What I'm super excited about, though, with this is this ultra high voltage transmission that China's been building since 2009. And this is the game changer. The ability to move solar energy around such a vast landscape like China or the United States, right? That's totally holding back renewables, that it is hard to quote unquote wheel power from point A to point B. And the way to do that efficiently is using ultra high voltage, both AC and DC, apparently. I know they're doing it in DC, but they're doing it in AC as well. And again, like, I understand it's a central government and they can make these decisions centrally and just do it. But this is leadership, and we need to be leaders like this. Bottom line.
The rules are a little different, of course. The volume and the scale is different. Each country is going to carry their own, weight up the hill, is the way it seems to be working. Germany had their time. California had their time. The U.S. as a whole, everybody could call NextEra having their own time right now. I like seeing the volume and the things that China does. I like seeing this HVDC. It's a big, non-trivial topic. In fact, 2 articles that were posted on my website last week, or one this week, one last week, was specifically about transmission. And I really like the HVDC. I dream of weird tech like a global network of electricity wires, undersea cables, so that we can say the sun never sets, because technically the sun never sets. And then if we put those cables along areas of very high wind, ocean wind output, we can just literally line our ocean cables with floating wind. And then we're done. And then we turn this planet into its own little animal, and we're all cells on mothership Earth fighting through the universe with our laser beams, because we'll have we will tow the sun where we choose, and it'll just always hang out behind us, filling us up with power.
We are a global species. We are a global economy. We need to we need to really start acting like it and get out of this one state, one nation business. It does not serve humanity. In fact, it hobbles us. So let's talk about the story on your blog, John. If you build transmission, the solar plus storage will commission.
I like
You're
the
a
title.
poet, and I didn't know it.
I like funny titles. So I wrote this story because a couple of weeks ago, it's actually an old story I've been wanting to cover, but a few weeks ago in Nevada, the utility submitted a request for 3 solar plus storage plants plus power lines to help move stuff around the state. And on this drawing, it's the angled chunk of the power line in the lower left, and then the left side straight piece. So you can see Green Lake North and Green Lake West. And the power line piece, I mean, first off, it was really sweet that we rolled out greater than a gigawatt hour of energy storage and 3 solar power projects with PPAs around 2.2 cents, and nobody noticed. It was just casual. It's like, oh yeah, here's 600 megs of solar, here's 1.2 gigs, 1.3 gigs of energy storage, some nice pricing, great pricing, 2.2 cents per kilowatt hour, dude, for 20 some years. And that was just casual. The neat part of the story was, hey, Nevada wants to build some transmission. And I thought that was sweet too. And so I just wanted to read the document because I checked out the IRP that was submitted to the utility. It's like 300 pages. So if you have a long weekend of scrolling through stuff that's very nerdy, you can click it. But within it, they described the project that they want to build, the different power lines. It's actually a combination of about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 power lines combining. And it can help the state have a 1.5 gigawatt higher peak of total energy. It also would let them tap into the Pacific Northwest and get cheap hydro. And then from the north, which is kind of north and then northeast of them a bit, they could tap into the cheap Midwest wind. So all that stuff was kind of cool to read with the transmission, to see the vision, the long term, the cost of it. And it's funny, all these power lines, like $1 billion worth of power lines, it takes 8 people to run. And that's half management, half labor, I guess. Probably one person in a suit and then 7 people in trucks with buckets. And it's just kind of neat to see that kind of document, to learn about what's happening. I liked it.
Excellent. Glad you're blogging about the grid. I think it's so important and so underappreciated that we need to upgrade our grid infrastructure. Let's talk about vertical solar, man. You don't see a lot of stories about vertical solar, but I think that this is going to become very, very popular in high-rise and low-rise construction, right? You're basically putting solar where otherwise you've got either, in this case, some HVAC equipment, maybe. Is that what's behind those louvers?
Yeah, I mean, technically, I don't know, but a lot of these structures, if you scroll down to the second image, you can see the modules go all the way up the side of the building. And, I know it's not creating a fundamental piece of the structure, but it's one material or another. There's a tall vertical line. You can see it to the right, all the way up to the top. It's that grayish, bluish one to your other right.
This here or this?
Right, one little more to the right, little more to the right. All right, right there, right? Straight up there. I think that right there is panels going all the way up.
Yeah.
And, you're going to have to put some sort of material on the outside of the structure, one thing or another. And
yeah, exactly.
Whatever.
And it's often made of glass or glass and aluminum. So why not make it a solar panel?
Yeah, I mean, and it's energy that's on site, and it's energy that's going to be there for 25 years. And the installation cost of it is probably very similar to the installation cost of anything else. You could probably put N-phase modules with micro inverters and then just plug them in right there. Not even have like a complex interconnection for the structure. If you just have a conduit running up and down the side of the building, You just dunk all the way up the whole thing, and that's it. And then they can be Wi-Fi controlled if they want some external management. But Enphase should be calling building manufacturers and say, hey, you want a microinverter unit, and this is why. And then they need to figure out some sort of facade infrastructure so that you can easily just unscrew 4 corners, flip a unit out if you need to work on it. Because, concrete you don't need to work on. So there will be a greater than zero O&M cost for this. But we know what the reality of microinverter and panel failure numbers are: super, super low. And if we have a panel, a microinverter, and it's plugging straight into the 120 or the 240, whatever it is right there, that's it for your hardware. So your failure points are lesser than a standard solar install. There's no combiner boxes. There's no disconnects. Maybe you still need a disconnect. I don't know how you'd work that for solar on the side of the building. There'll have to be some new UL code there developed probably. But it's not far from what they're already doing when they bust through walls and windows that have glass and electrical behind it. So I just, the building stock will evolve slowly. These buildings last 50 years, 100 years. So, and we're not building buildings as fast as we're putting solar on buildings. So this will always be a niche product. But as the build, over the course of 50 years, we're going to do a lot. And if we start integrating it now and get the architects thinking about it immediately, like they're doing in California, like they're doing in Cali, it'll build over time. It'll be a non-trivial chunk.
What you're referring to is that all new residential construction in California starting in 2020 has to be solarized. And that is the law of the land. And the writing is on the wall that this is going to happen everywhere.
And I think all government buildings, either by 2025 and 2030, and all commercial buildings by 2030. For California. That's part of the building efficiency code that's coming. Yeah. It's going to happen in other places. I mean, if I'm a developer and I'm going to sell a building and the guy across the street has energy generation integrated into the structure, his building is going to be a better ROI than mine. And it's called evolution. If they build a better building than me, I go out of business, and it's just going to happen. And these panels are cheap. The wire is cheap, and Enphase inverter is cheap. You put $1 million of solar panels on a building, that's relatively nothing relative to the cost of the structure. And I bet, think about this. If the building already has conduit in it and you're just adding a little bit of racking on the side of the structure, you're adding a panel and an inverter, we're talking 30 cents, 20 cents, 5 cents. So we're talking 55 cents per watt of hardware. Now you maybe have to have some centralized Wi-Fi, so that's $1,000. Let's say $5,000 just to up it a little. Mm-hmm. Installation, I'm going to argue will be negligible because somebody's going to have to do the work of installing something on the side of that structure anyway. You could probably install new solar in a structure at 60 cents a watt. That's going to pay back by Thursday of next week. Turn the building on. They're like, oh, payback. We're good. That's dumb. I'm pissed. If I don't get myself a new building with some solar, I'm going to be very upset with myself. That's now a life goal after this little conversation of ours, Tim. So that's next. I got the Tesla. Now I need to buy a building.
We're going to talk about agrivoltaics in a minute, but first I want to remind our listeners that they can find all of our content now at cesnrg.com/videos. Here's our Clean Power Hour section. The video here is private because it's going to publish today at noon. That's episode 12. Today's episode is 14. It'll publish tomorrow, and then we'll be all caught up. But check out CESNRG. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel there. And then if you go to the podcast page, you can get all our upcoming live events, like the one I did with Jigger this morning, like I'm going to do with Kimberly Santera at TerraPro Solutions, talking about de-risking utility scale solar and wind. And then in November, we have PVEL coming back on to talk about the inverter and battery storage scorecard. Let's talk about agrivoltaics. Love this topic. We've touched on it a couple different times. Here's a story in PV Magazine, and very clearly showing what appears to be a greenhouse with solar panels on it, huh?
I don't think it's greenhouse. I think it's just some sort of simple structure sitting above the trees. I don't know if that's a sealed structure there.
Okay.
I
A
mean,
trellis, a solar
yeah,
trellis.
there you go. There. It's a custom panel, like very high efficiency modules, like 20. They talk about the cell efficiency there. One of the interesting benefits they said is that pairs like a little bit less sunshine, and and this is I've never heard anybody say this before, but the solar panels are good at defending the pairs against hail.
Yeah, it makes great sense.
I know, but usually we're like, oh, hail. Whereas these guys are like, yeah, hail. It's it's a little different, because all the customers are like, hey, what happens if it hails? Because we have pieces of glass facing the sky, so there's a challenge. And that we all know what the hail numbers are. Um, Hail 1 inch across at like 50 miles an hour, and then hail 2 inches across at 30. You better cross your fingers at that 2 inch mark because that's some big hail. And so that's standard. And you can even get solar with thicker glass to better defend against hail in high hail regions. And so I wonder what they're doing with the glass. And but still, well, first off, it's always cool to see solar plus farming integrated because one, solar is farming. It's farming energy, and that sounds so cool. Two, we're always worried about land loss. Three, we don't pay farmers enough money. And so all this I just like. I like the confluence of it all. And, I keep thinking that we're going to grow significant volumes of goods in shipping containers in like farm buildings, our vertical farms. And they're going to be just structures downtown in New York City. And it's going to be $1 billion building. And all it does is just dump vegetables into the marketplace. But we also need to grow trees outside. And I just keep wondering about how it's going to work. And this opened my eyes a little bit to saying trees plus solar can actually jive because these trees will be actively managed. They'll be pruned and they'll be kept underneath the solar panels. It's just cool. And it's also neat that these guys see solar panels to protect hail. That was great.
Good stuff. I want to talk about New York State and this story about ICE engines being sunsetted. We saw the news a couple weeks ago about California putting a stake in the ground. We talked about it on the show. They're sunsetting ICE engines by 2035, I think also, right? So New York is following suit. I mean, I would imagine Massachusetts isn't far behind then, right?
Oh, no way. Yeah, Massachusetts is right there. We have net zero by 2050 legislation and maybe 2040. It's actually in flux in Massachusetts right now. And there talks, everybody knows about transportation in Mass. All the analysts, they're smart here. And so they're going to be developing this sort of legislation and talking about it. And, Mass takes a while to do stuff, and they usually do a pretty solid job of doing it too. I will say that. California tends to lead though. And then Mass is a little bit slower. California is screaming forward with their hair on fire. And Mass is like, oh, that's a good idea, but let's do it without the fire part. And they get it done too in their own way. So I assume, New York right now is really amazing in what they're doing. And New York and California being at the forefront of things like this, that's 60 million people. That's 1/5 of the United States almost. And if Massachusetts can hop in there, that's sweet, So yeah, it's coming. I mean, I'm outside driving one. It's funny, I didn't get an incentive for my car, which I'm okay with. I didn't buy it for that. In Massachusetts, the incentive is for cars that are less than $50,000. I think it's 2,500. And Tesla, on a federal level, no longer gets incentives because they've gone beyond 400 or 500,000 unit sales. So, but in reference to New York, great state, great plan. I hope they figure out how to do vehicle to house so that people can have batteries during resiliency events.
Yep. Going to see a lot more out of those three states, California, New York, Massachusetts. I wish I could say that Illinois was right behind you, but we're probably 5 years behind you. At least our governor is talking about it now. And
Hey, that's You know, that's Illinois is another giant state. I mean, you guys have Chicago, and then you're in the Midwest. That's a big thing. You get a chance to teach just a broader group of farmers about how solar and wind works. Actually, you guys are teaching us about how wind works. That's the reality. I mean, you guys have been doing wind in the Midwest for so long.
Yeah, I think Iowa's upwards of 45% wind powered. Uh, Jigger put a stick in our eye on our wind power this morning, but Illinois is ranked number 6 in wind. So we're right there. Here's a story about Germany, though. Renewables deliver over half of German electricity for the first 9 months. Coal plunges, the carbon bubble. I love it. What's going on in Germany, John?
So first, I'm going to throw out one caveat. The numbers are more complex this year because of COVID and the fact that wind and solar and nuclear, well, at least wind and solar, I know, get status on the grid to first run. And so the numbers might be a little bit outsized for this, but whatever, close enough. In the first 9 months, 3/4, that's it. 52.5, 52.9% came from renewables. I have 2 comments on this, though. One, I think it's more important that 65.5% came from CO2 free sources when you add in that big red uranium. And 2, I don't know about biofuels. Yes, we can call it CO2 free, or we can call it renewable. Cool. But is it CO2 free? People like to state that it's net zero. And if it is, then that's cool. But I don't know that. And I've seen a lot of pushback against the biofuel claims that they might be a little, at least in the United States with the corn and the ethanol. And I don't know, though. They just might be a little bit more CO2 positive than we want to admit. And so, either way, they generated at least 50% of CO2 free. If biofuel is CO2 free, then we could say 65.5% of Germany's electricity generated no emissions.
Do we know if Germany has a goal for being net zero the way China has?
Yeah. Well, I know they have at least an 80% goal.
Yeah. What Americans don't know is that Northern Europe has been working on greening their infrastructure hardcore for the last 10 years. We are literally 10 years behind the Europeans and the Chinese, although the Chinese economy is dirtier overall. They are going hard after renewable energy in a very concerted manner. We don't have a national standard in the United States. I think we need a national standard. While there will continue to be much action at the state and local level, I think it just really helps everybody, and it helps those leaders at the state level if they have federal support, which we have zero leadership on right now.
I thought it was kind of neat with that Germany number being 65.5%, with France being like 90%, with almost all of that nuclear, of course, with Switzerland being nuclear plus hydro, with Netherlands being all the wind. Where's that? Denmark. I mix up my Northern European countries. With Iceland being 100% geothermal, with the UK not running coal for like maybe almost 2 months, 45, 50 days with no coal, with the founding of the Industrial Revolution, 2 months with no coal. Man, that's a transition. So I thought it was cool. The whole little chunk of countries up there, they're doing a great job. But I want to make sure, the United States, we are over 40, 42, 43% of all of our electricity is now CO2 free. So we're like 20-ish of renewables, wind and solar is just over 10, hydro is around 10. We have a little biofuel, then we got 20% nuclear. So we got 40% plus of our energy that is CO2 free in the United States, of our electricity, pardon me, that is CO2 free in the United States. So we're behind, but, chucking ahead.
Yep. One step at a time. We're almost out of time, but we got a couple other stories here. For any kind of PV system repower or removal and reinstallation, Leaving as much of the racking, combiner boxes, and existing conduit wire in place, yes, can prevent risk of component damage. Um,
So this is new, dealing with repowering. And so if you show those pictures of what Carlos is doing on his LinkedIn page,
yeah,
he's
here we go.
he's yeah, he's a gentleman, and you can click through his profile at some point if you want. But he's brought in at least part of his work to repower solar systems, maybe to tear them down so that a building can get torn down, or whatever reason a solar system might come down. And he's my new favorite LinkedIn account to follow because I just get to see different stuff, because he's working in our industry, what's going to be a $30 billion a year industry in about 10 years. Because repowering, when everything starts hitting 10 and 20 years, these investors, they're going to want the latest and greatest modules, and we'll sell the older ones somewhere else. And so watching him do this work of collecting these systems, and it's really nice. If you go back to that link, if you get a chance, I want everybody to look at the stack of solar panels that are in the background. And it's clean, and it looks almost like it just came off a fresh truck. And I really liked about how clean his sites are, because you think when you're out there, look at those look at the pallets back there.
So those are used solar panels being stacked.
Yeah, and either they're going to be taken off the roof so that they can redo the structure, or they're leaving. It sounded like this is a teardown. So every system has its things, but look how clean that is. I mean, I would be happy buying that stack of panels, because I'm buying a big stack of glass and things that can break. That looks like somebody cared. And so I just I really like sharing his pictures on Twitter, and sharing his stuff, and just reading his posts, because I'm learning about a new part of the industry that I haven't done a repowering. I've been in the industry just over 10, 12 years. The only time I've done real O&M work is when I had to replace a bunch of sun power modules, because about 10 of them were busted because seagulls dropped quahog shells to get to the insides in New Bedford. And so you got to manage the quahogs. And, there's just shells. All my solar systems have seashells from the seashore via the seagulls in New Bedford.
That is an unusual hazard, I have to admit. Never heard of that before.
It is.
So do the panels get broken?
Sometimes,
Yeah.
not always, but
Yeah.
sometimes they do. And they,
Yeah.
the production's still solid, but you got to deal with it. And we're lucky that the panels are relatively cheap, and we have micro inverters, so we don't lose strings anymore. But yeah, it's something you have to deal with. And some people put up, they'll put up a siren that's like a hawk sound, or they'll buy a drone, or they'll do different things to scare the birds away. Some people are just like, give me another pallet, because panels are 30 cents a watt. You get the tax credit and the depreciation applied to the purchase of it if you buy them extra at the time. And so they just keep a pallet in the basement, and we just go up there, we inspect it once a year, and if we think we want to switch out a panel and it's worth it, that's when you do it.
Right on, right on. Well, I want to wrap up with this story about solar thermal. We don't talk a lot about solar thermal here, but here's a PV Magazine story about concentrating PV hitting 91% efficiency. That is a nice number, 91%. What's the story?
It's solar plus PV. It's thermal plus photovoltaic, actually. So this is a small residential system. It's about 1.5 kW of PV, and it's about the equivalent. Maybe it's 1 kW of PV and like 2.5 of solar thermal. And it has the ability to generate the equivalent of 30,000 kWh per year, I guess. Is that what it says there? And it's just a neat little piece of hardware. It's a dual axis tracker. It uses the hot water to also cool down the modules, so it makes them a little more efficient. It's a multi-junction cell. So we're talking about, a little more expensive of a product, a lot more.
Where's the PV in this thing though? I don't understand.
In that rod. So multi-junction, high efficiency multi-junction, has an efficiency level of 35%. So double our panels. And it's This is the stuff they use in space, and you only literally use because it's so freaking expensive. This is like $50 a watt type of stuff, $100 a watt type of
I
stuff.
see. So when you say they're using the solar thermal to cool the panels, they're running a coolant through this rod,
Yep.
which is getting hot, right,
Yep.
from the what is this called, parabolic dish,
Yep.
and then they're using the heat to do other things like generate hot water or
Heating, radiant. Plug it into your
yeah,
baseboards, under your
right.
floorboards. Yeah. It's neat tech. I really like it. Little tiny system. You could power a house almost. I mean, you couldn't power the house as electricity. You could definitely take care of the water, but you can knock your electricity use down probably halfway. And it's a dual axis tracker. So, of course, it's probably beautiful Italian engineering. And I used to work for an amazing Italian company who was based in northern Italy, Beghelli. They're a lighting company, started in the 70s. And the Beghelli family got into doing solar in the 2000s, in the aughts. The Beghelli, the sons of the company, they even had a dual access tracker that was made out of those three items, and they're somewhere nearby here. So I wouldn't be surprised if it turns out the Beghelli sons were involved here. They're lighting people. They don't do too much solar, but it's probably beautifully engineered. It's probably a little more complex to use, but it probably has a nice long day because it can start working at like 6:30 a.m., finish working when the sun goes down. Neat piece of hardware. If you got a nice house up in the woods, great piece of hardware.
Yeah, the Italians are well known in the hydronic heating and cooling space. So out west where there's very low humidity, hydronic heating and cooling is a thing. We don't see it so much here in the Midwest because of humidity issues. You can imagine when you have a panel that's full of cold water, right? Chilling the built environment, it tends to get moisture on it. So humidity is a challenge, but in California, it works really well. Well, John, we've come to the end of our Clean Power Hour. It's a great pleasure working with you. I want to thank you. And how can people find you?
Well, they could use the internet. And on the internet, you can type in commercial solar guy, and you'll find me all over a whole bunch of stuff. I'll be on, got my website, commercialsolarguy.com. I'm on Twitter, Solar and Mass. I'm on LinkedIn, all kinds of different places. So, commercialsolarguy.com. That's the best way to get a hold of me.
And hopefully soon you will be able to find content about the Clean Power Hour on John's website. You can also find it at cesnrg.com/videos or /podcast. You can subscribe to us on YouTube. Please give us a thumbs up. Please hit that bell for the energy transition so that you get all of our updates when we post new videos, which we're doing multiple times a week now. At least twice a week. This week is going to be a special week. I think we're going to drop 4 or 5 videos because we've got a backlog. But this is your place for clean energy transition news, information, technology, the latest and greatest from Montague and Weaver. So thank you, John, and you have a great day.
You too, Tim.